y'all, welcome back to our How to Canva series. So far, we've talked about the who, the what, and the how of Canva, and we've created a brand kit for our demo business. So if you're new here, be sure to go back and watch those last videos so you can catch up. Today, we are talking about design elements and specifically the top 5 design elements and principles the DIY marketer needs to know to make content that's going to resonate with their audience. But before we get into that, let's chat about design elements. What are design elements? Design elements are the visual pieces you use to build a design, such as color, shape, line, texture, typography, and images. All of these components work together to create a visually appealing design. I'm sure you're thinking, I could just use templates in Canva and instead of creating something new. And you're absolutely right. But knowing these elements and principles can help you to take your designs and even those templates to the next level. Have you ever seen a flyer or a graphic on social media? And when you stared at it, you couldn't just, you really couldn't just pinpoint what was wrong with it and something felt off. The way our eyes are drawn to certain things on the page gives us clues to how you want to design. So these are things that you would actually learn if you were studying graphic design, but you actually don't have to be a graphic designer to use them. So what we're going to talk about today is color, typography, space, contrast, and alignment. And as I'm going through each one, I'm going to show you how you can actually apply these elements and principles in Canva. Because understanding the concept is one thing, but actually knowing how to use it in your design is where it really matters. So let's get started. And first, we are going to talk about color. Honestly, color is one of the first things people notice when they look at a design. And like in our last video, when we talked about brand kits, I spoke about how choosing colors is important because you want to make sure that they're going to give the feelings that you want people to feel. For example, red can evoke feelings of love and passion and attraction, but also caution, power, and dominance. Black can be associated with elegance and intelligence, fear, or sadness. So think about it. If I showed you a design with really bright, bold colors, you're probably going to get a completely different feeling than if I showed you something with soft, muted colors. And that's why when you're creating a design, you don't want to just pick colors just because you think they're pretty. You want to think about what you want the design to communicate. Let's say you're creating a graphic for a luxury brand. You probably don't want to throw 5 super bright colors onto the page. You might want to add something more simple and sophisticated. But if you're creating a design for a children's brand or a fun event, you might want something more colorful and playful and bold. Another thing I see a lot of when people are designing in Canva is just using way too many colors. So I would recommend using about 3 to 5 colors for most designs. And typically you may want to pick colors that are aligned with your brand. You can have your main color, maybe an accent color, a neutral like black or white, and then a couple of supporting colors. And don't forget about contrast. If you have a light background, you want to make sure that your text or images are dark enough to actually be able to read. Because at the end of the day, your design can be beautiful, but if we can't read it, we definitely have a problem. So when you're choosing your colors in Canva, don't just ask, do I like these colors? Ask yourself, do these colors make sense for the message I'm trying to communicate? Are these my brand colors? Do these colors contrast enough? Next, let's talk about typography. Typography is basically the way text is arranged and presented in the design. Now I know in Canva it can be really tempting to look through all the fonts and think, ooh, this one is cute and that one's cute and I really like that one, because I'm guilty of doing it myself. But please don't just select your fonts that way. You do not need 10 different fonts in one graphic. In most cases, I would stick to about 2 to 3 fonts at most per graphic. You can you can have one font for your headline, another for your supporting text, and maybe a third if you really need it. But the fonts need to work together. And this is where font pairing comes in. You might pair a bold font with a clean, simple font, or maybe you use one bold font for your headline and a simpler version of that font for the rest of the design. The other thing I want you to pay attention to is hierarchy. Basically, I should be able to look at your design and immediately know what information is most important. If your headline, subheading, and body text are all exactly the same size and weight, we're going to have a hard time to try to figure out what we're looking at and what's more important. So make your heading bigger. You can make it bold, make your supporting font and information smaller. And then look at the design and ask yourself, do these fonts work with or against each other? Can I tell what I'm supposed to read first? If you struggle to identify which information is most important on your graphic, you may need to try something different. The third element is space. We tend to think that if there is empty space on our design that we just have to fill it with something, but we don't. The empty space is actually doing something. It's called white space or negative space, and it gives the elements in your design room to breathe. Think about walking into a room. If every single piece of furniture is pushed together and there's stuff everywhere, you're probably going to feel a little overwhelmed and cluttered. But if the room has space between the furniture, everything feels a little more intentional. Your designs work the exact same way. If you have a heading and an image, a logo, 5 different graphics, and a bunch of text all competing for space, your design is probably going to feel cluttered. Sometimes the best thing you can do is to remove something or move things farther apart or make your text smaller or even give your headline more space around it. I like to zoom out on my designs because sometimes when you're working really close up to your designs, you don't really notice how crowded it is. So zoom out and look at the design as a whole and then ask yourself, does everything have room to breathe? If the answer is no, you might need to give yourself a little more space in your design. And remember that empty space isn't wasted space. It's part of your design. Now let's talk about contrast. Contrast is basically what helps different elements stand out from one another. And you can create contrast in a lot of different ways. You can use light and dark colors. You can use big and small text. You can use bold and thin fonts. You can use different shapes. You can even create contrast by putting a simple element next to a more detailed element. One of the easiest examples is text. Say your headline is the most important thing on your graphic. You don't want it to blend in with everything else. So maybe you make it larger, maybe you make it bold, maybe you use a different color. That's contrast. And contrast is important because it helps create visual interest and hierarchy. It tells your audience, hey, look here first. So when you're creating a design, ask yourself, what do I want people to notice first? Whatever that thing is, use contrast to make it stand out. Lastly, we're talking about alignment. And I will tell you, alignment is one of those things that can make a design look instantly more professional. Alignment is basically making sure your elements in your design have a visual relationship with each other. So instead of just putting your text, images, and graphics wherever they happen to fit, you're intentionally lining things up. For example, if I have 3 different text boxes on the left side of my design, I want them all to line up. I don't want one slightly over here, one slightly over there, and another somewhere in the middle. Because if you can't immediately explain what's wrong with the design, your eyes can tell that something feels off. And thankfully, Canva makes this really easy. You have those little pink guides that pop up when you're moving elements around. You also have the position tools that allow you to align and space elements evenly. There is also a way to add grid guides by going to the File, Rulers and Guides, and then Add Guides. All of these tools help you to line your elements evenly, and you don't even really have to do it yourself by trying to eyeball it. Alignment doesn't mean that everything has to be perfectly centered. You can have left aligned text, you can have right aligned elements. The point is that the placement should feel intentional. So before you finish your design, take a second and look around. Do your elements line up? Is there consistent spacing between each elements or text? Does anything feel like it's randomly just floating there? If something feels off, alignment is probably... Let's recap. Color helps to set the mood and communicate your brand. Typography helps to communicate your message and establish hierarchy. Space keeps your design from feeling cluttered and overwhelming. Contrast helps important elements stand out. And alignment helps everything to feel organized and intentional. You do not need to be a professional graphic designer to create good designs in Canva. But by understanding some of these basic principles that graphic designers use can really make a huge difference in the work that you're creating. In our next video, we're going to experiment with Canva AI. And we all know how AI has taken the internet by storm. And if you want to learn how to use it in Canva, stay tuned for our part 4 of our How to Canva series. As always, thank you for watching. If you found this video helpful, please like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you in the next video of our How to Canva series. Stay creative.